it's one of those things that really makes me giddy. It's like the bizarre, trashy universe of Hollywood, where you're like, taking off your bad Darth Vader mask, and you're like, oh, hey, nice to meet you, and you got your like, like Princess Leia outfit, and it's like, it's just some shitty set in Italy or something.
We should do a movie together, you and me.
We should talk. Actually, a movie. I got a script. But a guy cuts off broad scalps, and she's like, it's just like, that's Hollywood, man,
Motherfucking goddamn orange peel beef.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to One Fucking Hour. I am Evan Husney, joined, of course, by my usual guys here. We got to the left, Tom Fitzgerald. Tom.
Greetings.
And you better be ready for it this time. Marcus, to my right. Marcus, what's going on?
You talking to me?
Oh.
Hey, you're a week late on that. What's going on?
I think he says it in this movie, too, actually.
Does he?
That line is.
Oh, maybe.
Okay, a little parallel.
All right.
Okay, well, that's pretty good then. Okay.
All right. Good night, everybody.
That's great.
The show's now called One Fucking Minute. So,
Right.
All right.
That's all I got anyway.
Motherfucking goddamn.
All right, so, all right. Well, this fucking week is going to be, or this fucking hour for this fucking week is going to be on the 1980 slasher movie Maniac. So we're going to be looking into that.
Guy's a maniac.
Guy's a freaking maniac over here.
Freaking maniac over here.
Yeah,
Chopping
I got some
people up.
Actually, before I hit the clock, I'm just going to mention that, we're going to get into this, but Joe Spinell, as the maniac, after he was in this movie, like cabbies all over New York City would honk as he was walking around the city, being like, "Hey, it's the maniac!"
Oh wow!
Yeah,
No kidding.
Really?
So yeah,
How you doing, fellas?
It's the maniac over here.
Wow,
Okay,
I
here
did
we
not
go.
know that.
Mm-hmm. All right, so here we go. We're gonna start the clock. Here we go, boys. Bing, bing, bing. All right, little background on this movie. All right, Maniac is the mega dark 16 millimeter slasher from 1980, which stars brilliant character actor Joe Spinell, as we just mentioned, as a deranged serial killer, Frank Zito, a troubled mannequin fetishist who is haunted by visions of his abusive mother. He stalks New York City's grimiest streets, scalping one victim at a time in this highly controversial and game-changing entry into the DIY horror underground. So, that is Maniac. And again, you can't talk about Maniac without Joe Spinell. And I thought that we'd sort of just kick this thing off by just educating the people on Joe a little bit. He is one of the more beloved, celebrated character actors among real, cinephiles. His IMDb, the movies that he's been in, is pretty freaking the range of these classics that he's in. He's in Rocky, Taxi Driver, The Godfather.
He's in 1 and 2.
He's in 1 and 2. That's right. He's in Godfather 1 and 2, The 7-Ups, 92 in the Shade, Star Crash, Cruising, Sorcerer, The Ninth Configuration,
Cruising.
Yeah, Nighthawks and
Forbidden
Eureka.
Zone. Forbidden Zone. Thank you. Good call.
So
yeah,
he's in a ton of stuff.
And he brightens up all those films, even if it's just like 90 seconds.
It's true.
Like in Forbidden Zone. It's just, he brings so much to it. I would call him, I don't know, it just hit me the other day. I was like, not that he's like the East Coast Timothy Carey. That's kind of stupid, but like he feels on par with Timothy Carey in a way. Just like a real loose cannon, scene stealing, character actor who's on the periphery of everything and probably has really dope friends. And I think they both did. And they were both kind of eccentric, but with sophisticated tastes, and very idiosyncratic acting styles. And anyway, I could see some kind of similarity between the two. I don't know anything about Joe Spinell except what I see on screen.
I think he's just an incredibly charming guy, and I think that anyone he met, like from Sylvester Stallone, who he was tight with, or Francis Ford Coppola, or like any of these like major directors,
Robert Duvall was a friend,
right? Or Robert Duvall, and these guys, I think they were just immediately charmed by, well, this guy is eccentric, but like there's something about him that's drawing me into him, and that comes across on the screen. But people just liked having him around.
Yeah, I think he was cool to hang out with, and also like super helpful, and always wanted to help other people out and stuff. Like he actually, what I ever heard is that he gave like Stallone, like he helped Stallone get Rocky made or something. Like he helped him, like he really believed in him and helped him get that project going.
Wow.
And
well, are you going to say it?
I'm going to say
Oscar nominations?
I was just about to say it. I was going to say, like, I think the evidence of all of this, you can see, on film, or on video probably, but when Joe Spinell is, present for when they're announcing the Oscar nominations in 1970, whatever, during the Oscar season for Jaws, and Steven Spielberg is nominated for Best Picture. The Jaws is, but Steven Spielberg is not nominated for Best Director, and Joe Spinell is cutting a promo about, well, how can you be nominated for Best Picture but not Best Director?
I don't get it. You make the best movie, but you didn't do it the best way. What the heck? And he's wearing a Jaws shirt.
Exactly.
It's incredible footage. I'm sure we'll cut to it during this stupid podcast. But like, they're like crouched over the TV. It's like 8 a.m. and they're doing the 1975 nominations. And they're all like, "Oh, he was robbed," and it's just like, what am I watching? And it just shows. No, but just back to the point of what we're talking about is just like, okay, for some reason, Joe Spinell was like absolutely essential for Steven Spielberg to have at the announcement of Jaws like nominations.
I heard he was supposed to actually be in Jaws, supposedly. Like he was he was supposed to be in Jaws. And he turned it down for some reason or another. Didn't want to travel or something. But he was supposed to be one of the guys like on the pier. Remember when like the shark is like ripping up the pier, like the two guys are running. He's like, "Run, Larry, run!" or whatever. Like Joe is supposed to be the guy like at the edge of the pier yelling, "Run!" For some reason, he turned it down, and then like
that would have been dope.
When I guess he just happened to be in town like around Oscar season. They said like someone bumped into Steven. One of Steven's people bumped into him. Was like, "Steven wants you to come to his house like right now," and they're shooting this thing. So like
amazing.
It just shows that he's got this kind of I was going to say Zelig, but maybe this Forrest Gump kind of Hollywood life. Something.
Yeah. Totally.
Anyway, help us out about Spinell. You're the Spinell whisperer today, Evan.
Yeah, but he seems like the guy that would be like, got your back. He'd take the shirt off his back for you. He'd be such a good-natured, guy. He's super charming, but he's also the guy that would just totally tear down a strip club, and he would be the one, crowd surfing, he would probably just be the life of any party, and, he's a center probably of attention, and all these guys yucking it up just would appreciate
You know what
that.
he is? He's Fun Bukowski. Like something like that. I could see that. Like instead of a down pain in the ass,
No, not at all, yeah.
I sense that.
Just
Go
a
ahead.
great, fun-loving dude. But anyway,
like Bukowski, hard living, right? Like he could tell that he was like, drinking and
but also salt of the
yeah.
Also, we were talking about earlier, like salt of the earth. Like I don't know, we got this little catchphrase going that he sort of and in this film represent kind of the auteurism of the working class. It's the Queens Plumbing Company van sophistication that seems to be exemplified by the film and Joe, and that's very special.
He was a taxi driver for a while, for 9 years or something. So yeah, he lived that life.
100%. You could see it on his face. I mean, his face is so distinct, with those pock marks and the hard lines and everything. That's what makes him a great character actor. But I mean, he really is, completely authentic. And we're definitely going to get that, and that's what I think makes Maniac extra scary. But we're going to get to that in just a second. Just a quick little sort of background on, how Joe Spinell met the director of Maniac, Mr. William Lustig. I think an acquaintance of all three of ours, I'm sure, from being around in the, movie theater world. But Joe Spinell was met Lustig on the set of the 7-Ups. the film with Roy Scheider. And Joe was playing a thug or something, but he was, again, just one of the more approachable people on set, and Lustig was a PA on that movie. And so he got to know Joe through that, started talking to him about horror movies, and they liked horror movies, and so they liked those things, and they stayed in touch until William Bill was raising money for his first real feature film. And so then they put all this money together, him and his partner. Lustig had a partner, Andrew Garoni, and they put a total of $48,000 together, put it in basically opened up a bank account and started filming, not really making a budget or a schedule or anything. And so just a lot of this movie was very DIY, very scrappy. Then they ran out of money, and then of course they raised some additional, which was
just to stop, I'm going to assume every shot is stolen completely.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. I mean,
it's total punk rock
in this movie.
And I didn't know it was 16. You mentioned, I didn't even know it was that low production.
Yep, 60 millimeter. And basically, you're seeing, shots in the New York subway, where they're in subway cars. Of course, there's no permits, no nothing. And again, the only way you could make a movie like that rogue in New York City at that time was with the help of a friend of the show, One Fucking Hour friend of the show, Randy Jurgensen, a man that we talk about a lot when he's a former New York City cop we talked about in the Cruising and the French Connection episode.
Right.
He was so he basically a fan of movies. He would flash his shield anytime cops would give any trouble to the production. So he was basically distracting all the station agents while they were filming the subway scenes and stuff. So it's just super cool that he also has a connection to both this movie and the Friedkin films that we've talked about. But Randy Jurgensen is a legend, So, and he's in the movie. Briefly,
how could they?
What is he in the movie? Is he one of the detectives?
He's one of the detectives at the very end that comes out of.
When they come through the door, after Joe Spinell is murdered by ghosts.
Right.
Wowie zowie, it's amazing. Yeah, and the stolen shots, and just a little anecdote. I had always heard that the incredible gore set piece of Savini blowing his own head up in the car is that they're firing a shot in New York City, and that could get you just 5 years instantly.
Oh yeah.
So they had 60 seconds to get the hell out of there, post firing the gun itself. So
that was a live round. It was a live round out of a shotgun. They had a getaway car. They threw the gun in the trunk of the car, took off in order to get the shot clean.
It was a live round. So it went through the window, and it went through the fake head with the apple cores and spaghetti sauce
and shrimp.
And filled up the fake. And
it looked great, and they really made a meal out of it on screen too. Just they let that shot run on.
It's the gore scene. There's nothing that beats that. Can I just say, I just have one little sort of T-shirt thing about Maniac. It's power, and I just thought of it today. It was the problem with Maniac, how it's so effective and so unsettling even now, is that Joe is too good. So he's really selling this really disgusting, sweaty piece of shit guy. He's just too good at it. It's like a real actor finally making this awful protagonist or antagonist, and Savini's too good. So it's you don't. What I mean is, you can usually escape getting really messed up by a horror movie because there's these tells that it's just a cheap production. And that it's threadbare and the wires are showing, and so it kind of gives you a break. But not this film. It's so suffocating because it's so well done. And Texas Chainsaw, I think, is maybe the only other one that's like that. Everything's on all cylinders, so you can get lost in the film. Anyway.
Right. No, I feel that too. It's a lot of times you're looking at the gore, and I'm not a big gore person myself, but a lot of times if I do see a gore in a movie, I'm it's eye rolling because it looks bad, or you're kind of laughing at it because it was pulled off dumb or whatever.
Right.
This one makes you feel really queasy and I
know. I gotta say, when his head is being torn off, I mean, do you guys agree? Those effects are so good when his head's being torn off at the end that it's just I'm watching someone's head being torn off. I don't think of the how-to. What do you guys think?
Right. Yeah. Well, that one I do see the head a little bit. I do see
never mind.
every time, yeah.
I mean, no,
I'm going to disagree with you there, Tom, because
the gripping it. But I mean, the gripping at the neck part.
No,
I guess
it's a
what I'm saying
horrific moment. It's a
something
great
that-
shot and a horrific moment. But if you look at the face, I see a little bit of just the. Yeah, but that moment is really well
meant more
done,
the
over
neck,
the head and stuff. And
anyway.
I think it's like every time he killed a woman in that movie, I would wince and I'd be like, oh no, ugh. And so like I feel it's very viscerally effective as a film, which it's what you're saying is like that it's it's a cut above others.
If we can just say, I mean, kind of off the top, we were rattling off all these movies that Joe has been in as a very small part, a very memorable but small part. But he also, this is his starring role. This is his first opportunity to really, be the marquee star. And he always said during the making of this movie or leading up to it, if Stallone could have his name above the credits, so could I. And that's what this is. Which is so.
Sure.
So this is the movie he does that. Okay, but
I know, like I want to break out as a leading man, where I rip women's scalps off their heads.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
What do you think?
I know he helped write it too, right, and produce it.
Yeah.
So like he went all in on it.
It's like a co-collaboration with Billy Lustig, I think.
And I definitely want to touch on some of that stuff. But one thing, if I can, for me about Joe in this movie. Observation is, most serial killer movies, not all, most, don't really have truly unattractive actors playing serial killers. I mean, you might say Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, maybe, but nobody looks like Joe, playing a serial killer in most movies. Yeah. And I'm saying most ones that we're aware of that aren't super deep cut, and
which makes it adds believability to it. It doesn't look like it was a casting call thing.
Oh my God, no, exactly. And sometimes like I don't know, I kind of equate it to like I'll pass people on the street or I'll see someone like in a diner, and be like, holy shit, imagine if that guy, played a serial killer in a movie. That would be the scariest fucking thing ever.
See, Evan lives in New York and we live in California, so we don't actually have that here.
Oh, that's true. Well, actually,
yeah, no, I'm not even kidding. Sorry?
If I can, about 10 years ago, I saw this guy in a New York City diner. And it was like, but if this guy, was in a serial killer movie, that's what this movie is like to me. Yeah. Is like somebody off the street.
That's like a Nathan for you guy.
Yeah.
Too,
But it's like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I got you. No, totally.
Right. But that guy wrapped in like a very good actor who you can't take your eyes off Joe.
Well, yeah.
And he's like, he adds a lot of dimension, weirdly adds a lot of dimension to this character. And the music kind of, you feel sympathy for the character in some ways. Like he's sort of
really
like
sick that they do that.
Sad, sick child. I know, it's weird. The music makes it kind of adds to that like emotional point of view that you feel kind of like a little bit of the tragedy of the
He's the only full character in the film. Even Carolyn Monroe is kind of just a sketch. I got to say, I was racking my brain right before we started doing this. Are there other, just to speak to what you were saying, just to live on this for 1 second, like when a character actor has a lead role, it could be sort of strange and special. And all I could think of just now was Uncle Joe Shannon, which was Burt Young's leading role back to Rocky. So he's what's the brother in Rocky? Why am I not thinking of that? He's the brother in Rocky.
Yeah. I can't.
So, and he's Talia Shire's brother. No, he's not. No, he's Talia Shire's brother, and he's best friends with Rocky, and that's Burt Young. And there's a movie from 1979 where Burt Young's the lead, and it's kind of like, and then he never did another lead role again, because it's weird, So there are a few other examples, but it can. It is a very special micro, thread in film, and Joe tears it up.
This is the rare, successful version of that. I think, isn't it? We were talking last week about how in Taxi Driver he's kind of cool, and you feel some sympathy for him, even though he does something horrible, And I felt that in this movie too, you feel sympathy for the character, and we were also talking about how. There was a little criticism of Taxi Driver for like how he's like able to charm people, And this movie does. I was thinking about that in terms of this movie too, because there's a whole kind of diversion with Carolyn Monroe's character where he's sort of like charming her and like, and it seems like like he's acting like an artist or something, or like an agent or something, to get into that world. And I just wondered about, I don't know, it's a great performance, and Joe's very charming and stuff. And it's like kind of nitpicky to critique this movie on that level, but it got me thinking about it just in terms of what we were talking about last week with Taxi Driver. That like the character would be incapable of being like that charismatic and charming, and I felt like that a little bit with the Maniac.
If I could rephrase what you're saying in a way, it's like it's funny that this film took some Taxi Driver elements, including one that kind of like rang the bell a little wrong for us, and Pauline Kael, by the way, where did De Niro become so charming? Because I just saw him kind of like mumbling and buying Milk Duds and barely being verbal with anybody, right? Monosyllabic, and it's like, where did this come from? Where he's kind of like he's got a little game, but it's true. They grabbed that from Taxi Driver and did that for this film, and it is odd because I guess it's like for me, it's like, forget Taxi Driver for a second, but it's like in this film, it's like, why can he not just do that and just date? You know what I mean? Like, and I guess what they're doing, there's a lot of, and I don't know if it's a criticism, I find it cute. There's a lot of like real trashy, like dime store Freudianism in this film, like "Mama beat me," that kind of thing. But then also like there's two sides of him, and you never know which one you're gonna get. And it's like some days he really does love Carolyn Monroe, and then some days he's like, "You bitch," and it's like with all that kind of threadbare Freudianism, I think there's something that they're grappling for, which is just like there's a good Joe Spinell and there's a bad Joe Spinell.
So
and
if I
think
can,
the good one, but talk to me, yeah.
So I know what the deal is with these scenes more so than I do with Taxi Driver, but basically the reason for these scenes in this movie, which is kind of funny and very indicative of a low-S budget movie that needs some money, is so Carolyn Monroe's husband is the key financier of this movie. So after the 48 grand ran out, they basically got this guy, Judd Hamilton, I want to say off the top, I think that's his name. He was Carolyn Monroe's husband at the time, and he put up the rest of the money for the movie. And so those scenes are pretty much padding to get her in the movie more, kind of thing.
Hey, you got to do what you got to do.
Got to do what you got to do. And it's funny because if you listen to the audio commentary track, God, I'm such a nerd for this movie. If you listen to the Laserdisc audio commentary track, Lustig says on there that he basically watches these scenes a little bit and cringes because he basically admits that they don't work at all, and it doesn't, it doesn't really, like, he could never get to that point of being that, understanding or like being that like these scenes just don't really work, and it's kind of hard for him to watch. And I think he might have done various cuts on the movie, actually trimming them down even further. So they're not favorite parts of his in the movie, and something they sort of had to do. And they're super young at the time making this freaking movie.
Oh, so. Of course. Now, what I heard on Carolyn's side of things, this is what I do know, is that Carolyn met Joe Spinell on the set, of course. We've all been there. We've all been on the set of a bad Star Wars ripoff, and they met on the set of Star Crash.
I love that they're both in that.
I love that, but it's not just that. It's where they met, and she really fell for him. I saw an interview, it's online or something, where she's like, "He's the most charming man in the world," and I love him. I loved him then. I still love him, and like she just has an enormous amount of affection for him, and I think she was ready to ride or die with him, including this film. With her, I think it was just that and the husband's money, and like, let's get my wife in.
Yeah, I'm sure she loved him. It's like the inertia of Joe, I'm sure she loved him.
Exactly. Yeah, but it's funny that they meet on that set, and maybe we can roll some of that footage, in the post when we talk about this. But it's just it's one of those things that really makes me giddy. It's like the bizarre, trashy universe of Hollywood, where you're like, taking off your bad Darth Vader mask, and you're like, "Oh, hey, nice to meet you," and you got your like, like Princess Leia outfit, and it's like, it's just some shitty set in Italy or something.
We should do a movie together, you and me.
We should talk. Actually, a movie. I got a script, but a guy cuts off broad scalps. And she's like, it's just like, that's Hollywood, man. Hooray for Hollywood.
Yeah, I know.
It's someone should make a remake of the making of
Maniac.
Maniac
on
the
set.
Star Crash.
That sounds fun. That sounds really fun. And so but going to Joe, back to Joe in this movie, you know, we were sort of talking about the Queen's Plumbing Company auteur theory here, which I think is, you know,
Cinema,
Joe,
buddy.
yeah, you know, Joe is contributing so much creatively to this, and I thought it was interesting, you know, how this sort of idea came about to make this movie in the first place. Was one of Bill Lustig's friends basically said, "Hey, you should make Jaws on land." You know, Jaws is.
Are you kidding me?
I swear to God. Yeah.
Oh my.
And they didn't make claws.
Oh my God.
But you should make
As
Jaws
if there was no precedent for that. As if no one had ever made a film where there's a person killing people.
I know.
On foot. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Well, it's it's just a purely, you know, like, because it did so well, you should do it.
Yeah.
Make money.
Hey, that's so Queen's Plumbing, that kind of thing.
That does tie in. I saw an old news report of Bill Lustig talking about, there's like a criticism of violence in movies, and he does talk about this movie in relation to Jaws briefly, but in relation to following the POV of the killer. And at that moment, I was thinking about, you know, his point is like, oh, even if you follow the POV of the killer of the shark in Jaws, doesn't mean that it's you're sympathizing with the shark, you know, or whatever he says.
Right.
But anyway, it's interesting because that could have, you know, you do kind of follow some of the guns, like you're looking down the barrel, you know, like a shark coming out of the water. So maybe that did inform some of.
Oh
his,
yeah, and it opens with kind of a scene on the beach. You
that
know,
does feel like that feels exactly like Jaws.
And it does, and it has that and that seems.
Good God, it's more like more like Jaws than I thought.
Yeah.
Well, the opening scene. You know what the opening scene does? It always reminds me of a dream sequence in The Sopranos, and that's very cool.
Totally.
You know,
because it's like daymare,
and I love that.
At the shore.
Yeah. Well, and those things. I was just in Rockaway Beach. Those friggin' like. Telescope. What are those things? Binocular things.
The binocular things, yeah.
Yeah, that are on every down the boardwalk, and I'm like, it's just so Sopranos to me. It's just
yeah. No, you're totally right, and it's really freaky too. Like, and of course, you know, you could tell with the sound design, they're really experimenting with the high frequencies and the low frequencies, you know, and they're doing all that, and the one shot of the guy getting like garroted too. That's a pretty freaking brutal ass effect there, Mr. Salvini. The one thing I want to say, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say the Jaws on land thing, to just tie that together real quick, and then we'll bring it somewhere else, is just that once that was put into Lustig's head as an idea, it was like, okay, well, what's the monster going to be? And then him and Joe sat down and figured out the monster was really inside the mind of this character, of Joe Spinell's character, right?
Right.
And
not like a thing from the sewer or the Martian or something.
Right.
That's funny. Yeah, right. I was thinking about that when I was watching, because they call it a horror movie and stuff, and it's like back in the day before you made a distinction between now. As a horror movie usually has a kind of like a supernatural element to it now, right? And this is like more of a slasher. If it's like a real person going after somebody or something.
Well, even back then, it was like still the exception to have a non-supernatural horror film. I mean, even Night of the Living Dead has a supernatural element. But Texas Chainsaw, in comparison, it did not. And Last House on the left did not.
Yeah.
Yeah, but just getting more into the 70s cycle of things. It's like those films were so influential, and I think that they really flipped everybody's wig because they didn't have any kind of like extra dimensional, paranormal kind of dimension to it. So, and I think because even Halloween is a little supernatural, he gets up at the end. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What are you say, Marcus?
I think,
and then Friday the 13th gets absurd by 3, the third film. Go ahead.
Right. Sort of. It's right. I don't want to give it away, but you're right. Yeah, I see what you're saying. It has some. It's rooted in reality.
Yeah. Jason
gave away
spoilers.
No Jason spoilers. Here.
So watch the movie, guys. Okay, so just when when you watch this movie, I was thinking a lot about how they built the monster in their mind, of like how they put together this guy, and he really feels like an amalgam of like all these sources. Like he's a little bit psycho, right, talking to his mom. He's a little bit of Son of Sam. That one scene where the shooting in the car, Zodiac. Like killing a couple that's out for like a picnic. And like The nurse, killing a nurse, reminded me of Richard Speck. Like
Absolutely.
and Jaws. That you're saying, like so there's all you can kind of piece together, like how they were like, this is gonna be the ultimate fucking monster movie.
Right. But yeah,
Anyway.
but Son of Sam, actually, just maybe I wouldn't mind if we dovetailed into the setting, of the film for a second. New York fucking city, and we've just done Taxi Driver, and just to speak to what you're saying, as we're ticking things off, the Son of Sam. It seems hard to imagine now, but it really freaked that city out. I think they were looking for an excuse to freak out because they were freaking out by just living in New York City in 1977. But just the randomness. And yeah, there's this scene where we talked about earlier where the gunshot, blows the Tom Savini character's head off. They are coming from a disco. They are parking. They are necking. And that is basically ripped from the pages of the Son of Sam story. And that's just so horrific. And it's just, thinking this film it was shot in like 79. This was filmed at a strange time in New York City. The Son of Sam in 77, but then of course the blackout and the huge riots that happened, the rampant violence. It was so bad that people on the subway, they were having their fingers cut off so that criminals can get to the rings. So there's it was you know what I mean, and you had to turn your pinky ring. You had to turn your ring around. Like, on the subway. I mean, I'm not old enough to remember any of this, but it's just I had heard, like, you got to do that. And then it started to be this thing called no radio. Have you heard of this? Where you put up a placard. In your car, you put up a placard, and in big letters it just says, no radio. Because what happens is they were just busting everyone's windows to get to the radio and yank it out. That was the big desirable thing. So everybody's like, don't even try. And it's just, you would walk around New York City. I remember this when I was a kid. You just see no radio over and over again. Wow. So it was like a war. It was a war zone, and it's reflected in that song, like The Message, the early hip hop song. Mm-hmm. So, it's like right before Koch began to sort of clean things up, it was at its lowest. And that's right when this film was shot. And it felt like an open sewer where maniacs are running the show and can kill you at any moment. And it's reflective of, it's like, I'll shut up after this, but it's like Taxi Driver. It's as if Joe Spinell was not working at the cab company, right? But it's in fan fiction that Travis Bickle at some point just is, passing prostitutes and walking right by the Joe Spinell character in Maniac.
Yeah. I love
it's
that.
The same town is all I'm saying.
Yeah, and it's and just to go on what we were talking about, supernatural horror films and stuff. It's like obviously the guy. This is a very New York City movie. You got a bunch of tri-state area people making this movie, and like and what they're responding to is obviously what's around them, and that's what obviously is propelling this, and that's why they're looking more towards the Son of Sam version of horror, versus doing anything more than that. But this movie does have some supernaturally surrealist dream sequences.
Yes.
Where it has that kind of sad horror thing with, the mom coming through the grave and the mannequins coming to life and tearing them apart, which make it awesome. I mean, that kind of puts it into another.
But it's rooted enough into being the sweaty nightmares of a New York, typical New York City citizen at the time. But it's true. It does get fantastical. It's a good point. I kind of spaced on that.
Yeah.
Can we talk about his place, maybe?
Yeah, that's where I want to go. Exactly. If we can.
Do you want to go? Because I want to go to that too. I want to preface this as: does it say "born without a spine"? That incredibly disturbing sculpture.
I don't know.
Or is it mother?
I thought it said
mother?
Born without a mother is what I thought it said.
Mother. It is mother. No, because. Okay, that's me and my 12-year-old friends when we rented this on video. We were like, what is that? We would freeze it. It was videotape. It was hard to read.
It'd be pretty hard to read on VHS,
Yeah, exactly. And we just started saying born without a spine because I think that's what's... Never mind. It's just, that's what I think spina bifida is. And so but it's mother, which sort of makes more sense. But dude, that sculpture though. You have
there's a lot of it
sculpture?
too. Yeah.
No, but that one sculpture, the white baby upside down.
No, I'm saying there's a lot of it. We see it a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very prominent. You got any info on that?
Oh, I have info on just the apartment in general. It's like
the set dressing. Yeah,
totally. Queens Plumbing auteur strikes again. It's a very Queens Plumber auteur move is to approach a Russian artist in the East Village to design.
Love it. That's almost Liquid Skyish.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Go on. I'll shut up. Sorry.
So some Russian artist that Joe probably got smashed with at some bar in the East Village. I know this guy that we can bring in to do this thing.
Hey, we're making a movie.
We're making a movie, and so and that's a lot of it. A lot of the artwork you see in there is that guy's artwork, which everything in there. And then
you have a name? You have a name?
I don't.
Like you could look it up.
I do have two funny details about it.
Go.
Same story. That one, Lustig said that the guy didn't know how to. He said like, "Oh, sure, I can build sets or whatever." So he went there and started building it, but he was actually building a working apartment. Like the walls, you couldn't move the walls and to shoot, and he made the sink work,
right.
and he spent way too much money and stuff. So he was actually building a real apartment instead of a set. And then also, what's her name? Sharon, she's like the porno actress who's in this. Yes. So Sharon Mitchell in a Q&A, she was saying that Joe Spinell met this Russian guy at the Hellfire Club.
Oh.
Call back to Cruising.
Oh. Wait, Joe did? Joe did?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess she was saying just saying it's the famous S&M bar or whatever. Wow. So
amazing,
and,
perfect.
So that's where she said that he was there doing research, and that's where he met this Russian artist and said like, oh, you're an artist, you should do sets for my movie.
Well, he's probably doing the Cruising quote unquote research. Mm-hmm. Wowie zowie. Well, if we can find out that name, I'd love to. I just want to see his work, So that's Queen's Plumbing Company Tourism right there, Brett.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then
I love that. I got this guy, this Russian guy. He makes crazy shit. It looks like a nutcase, like art.
Oh, that's what she said. That he worked at the Hellfire Club building some of the contraptions and stuff.
See that
the Russian guy we're talking about, the same guy, the artist.
Yeah.
Wowie. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So his apartment. Do you have any insight on the Cracker Jacks? Did Joe?
I was wondering that too.
So, but that seems like such a Joe kind of mindset thing to do, where he takes the Cracker Jacks and feeds it to the doll in the bird cage. Whatever that is, Paulie Gutierrez, Paulie Gutierrez auteur brain. I don't know how to explain that exactly, but it's that sort of logic. You know what I'm saying?
It's like working class method. I totally get you. No, and it's like he had heard somewhere, one sentence, he had probably heard somewhere eccentric isms, maybe like a Brando move, because Brando would do little things to distinguish himself and do idiosyncratic little behaviors to help him get in character. Go ahead.
Yes.
I thought it was, I interpreted it as like sort of the first little hint we get that he's just a big child inside who, because he's like, he's got the whole thing with his mother. He's crying. He's like talking to his mom later, but mommy don't go and stuff like that. So I interpreted it as just like the first little hint we get that he's just a big baby, basically.
Just a quick Joe detail. Very early on, I think the first scene you see of him in the apartment, he looks in the mirror and you see all the scars on his body, and that was one of the details he wanted to have in there because he really put in a lot of the idea that he should be abused, by his mother, and you're seeing visual hints of that. And Joe was really adamant about those little details. So yeah, it is that Marlon Brando sort of detail-oriented thing.
It's finding your character.
Yeah,
it's funny because you see scars in Taxi Driver too,
right,
and
right.
And I swear there is a line in this movie where he goes, like Helen Monroe says to Madoon, he goes, "You talking to me?" She asks him out on a date, and he's like, "You talking to me?"
Oh wow!
I know that had to be. Yeah,
talking to me?
Really.
Yeah, all right.
I'm sure that's a nod. Yeah,
Yeah, so he contributed a lot to this movie. There's also some ideas that hit the cutting room floor that he wanted to have in this movie. I don't know if you guys have heard about the clam at all.
Yeah, let's just walk right by that one.
Sure.
Go ahead and Google that if you guys want.
Are you familiar with this? Are you familiar?
I don't know it. No.
Oh, he was like, why don't we do brutal things to the women? And like one of them is like, why don't I bite part of her off?
Yeah,
and then just Savini, actually Savini like hit his limit. He was like, oh, and he was like, I don't even know how to do that. Let's not do that, Joe.
Yeah.
So So what you're saying, just to maybe clarify things for us and everybody, is like he certainly created a character where there would not have been one if it wasn't for him.
Oh, it would have been totally.
He was also contributing to things like the killing set pieces. It sounds like he made it like more violent, right? Like he was like, even like let's have the women be scalped, that kind of thing.
No, the scalping came from Savini because Savini had developed
because he could do it.
Because he could do it, and he's like, it would be great. So all these guys are really sick, dudes. When you're talking about all the things that they wanted to do, but. Yeah. To your point earlier is that, Joe created a lot of this character, and it was Lustig's just kind of job to sort of like document it, and that's what he just, it's just like, I'm just going to film the world that Joe is kind of creating and inhabiting.
Wow.
That's like what this movie really is. I mean, that's how you
could, that's how you could very briefly encapsulate. It's like, it's Joe Spinell's vision.
Yeah.
And it's just assisted.
Yeah.
Lustig was like assisting it.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And
I didn't know it was that.
Totally. And one of my other favorite little Joe eccentricity details that only he would come up with is, of course, you got to mention the shot of him crying and shooting that little toy sci-fi gun.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's back to Marcus's point.
Yeah. Yeah.
The infant, the hurt child inside of Joe.
Right.
Now, maybe just where are we? 20-minute mark. Maybe just a few, maybe just to kind of get a little more wider range on addressing this film. We're very Joe-centric, as it sounds like we should be. But this is one of the movies I like from that era that's like a disco slasher. And yes. What I mean is, if I remember right, Miss 45 has some disco shit in it, right? Of course.
Yep. Sort of, kind of.
And
it's a little atonal, no-wave disco kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, like no wave-ish. Anyway, but more my point is, I always connect this film in a few ways to, again, Don't Go in the House, because Don't Go in the House has struck by boogie lightning. He listens to disco because guess what? Disco was huge. Where? In the tri-state area. I mean, no, I mean everywhere. No. What I'm saying is it was, because it's Saturday Night Fever, Tony Manaro is so fucking Queen's Plumbing right off the bat. And so, it's like, we got to get some disco in here. So Queen's Plumbing is definitely in Don't Go in the House with Boogie Lightning Song. But then, of course, what's the classic in this film? The Toe Tapper. That's kind of a Kid Creole thing affiliated.
Yes, that's, Dr. Buzzard. Yeah, exactly. Did you want to say the name of the band?
Go ahead. I mean, help us out.
Oh, it's like Don Armando's Second Street Rumba Band. And when I hear that song, and I was like, who is this? And looked it up, and I was like, that name and the sound both remind me of Kid Creole and Dr. Buzzard. And of course, the dude was in Dr. Buzzard's band too. So it's that kind of late 70s, early 80s, kind of 40s disco mashup kind of thing.
No, dude, I was just going to say, there was a thing happening right at the end of the 70s, right at the end of the big boom disco. And it was there is a Lucille Ball disco rap. Or not rap, but it's a Lucille Ball disco where it's Ricky. Da, da. It got so far into mid-century 40s and 50s as disco, and Ethel Merman had a disco song.
Yep.
I'm not making this up. That that going to a showdown. That kind of Bob Hope, Bing Crosby, Road to Morocco kind of disco kind of thing.
Right.
For some reason, it was
about how
really
the 50s was really big in the 70s, but there's this undercurrent of people that were like, no, fuck the 50s. We're into the 40s.
Yeah. And Kid Creole is all that. It's like Carmen Miranda's, Road to Bali kind of outfits and stuff. So of course it wound up in Showdown, which is a killer ass song. And so I just want to give a shout out to disco slashers and a real totally is representative of the time and place. Again, tri-state area, late 70s. That's what's up.
Yeah, the Italians did it too, right? That Don't Go in the Park or whatever. Isn't it another slasher disco kind of anyway? Just whatever, disco horror
Slashers.
Rules for sure.
Let's spend a few minutes talking about the controversy of this movie, if we can, just for a minute, and then I do want to talk about my favorite scene in the movie, my favorite scenes in the movie.
Let's do it. Controversy.
But controversy. I mean, obviously, this movie has a fucking insane movie poster. Maybe one of the most insane movie posters of all time.
It's rough. I saw it. It was in the New York Times. We get it every Sunday. And, I was real young still. And I saw it and I went, hey, man, I know horror, baby, but that's going too far, because I was like that, it's so unsubtle. It's the penis bulge, that's running along the blood tip knife. It's like, come on. Like, it's just like, it's so bad. And it really does feel like women who were against pornography then, like they had a case, they would just like, it was exhibit A. It was just like, what are you doing?
Yeah, exactly.
What is this? Because it was so, the sexualization of it was so on the surface and overt, more than like Halloween wasn't,
It's definitely a big factor in the films. Like, it's a horrific poster. It's rendered so well. It's like, it's got a nice, it's really airbrushed really nicely or whatever they did. It like looks great. It feels like, it doesn't feel 70s to me. It always feels like 80s, to me, which I think kind of like about this film. It's got that kind of
all right, enough
in between,
okay.
in between the 70s and 80s, but
yeah, I got you.
I think with that poster is definitely like one of the reasons I think the film is still like notorious, and like it has a lot to do with the film's success. And I think I even saw like Lustig call that out too and say that the poster had a lot to do with the film, like getting
it was
going a lot further than
I think
they
that was
thought
the
it would.
I think that was the main controversy, though. Like
yeah, because there were people you
I
can
think it was
see,
definitely
yeah,
we didn't see it. I just saw the
you can
poster.
you can see footage of people like in New York City or in other places who are living in their apartments, and outside their fucking window is a billboard.
Well, that was in L.A.
Or in L.A.
Yeah,
right.
Anyway, in L.A. there's an architecture firm that had a small billboard like across from their parking lot. So they'd like go, good morning, like have coffee and open the window, and it's like, with the knife, and they were like, fuck this. And there's video footage of it.
Yeah,
the woman who ran the architecture firm,
painting
she just
over
had it whitewashed, and they had white paint over it. They were like, enough, I don't need this shit. Yeah. And I actually really get it. It feels oppressive, and it feels like things are going too far. I mean, this is like 4 years after Snuff.
Yeah.
Snuff being a film that was packaged as being like, hey, I think people like, oh, this woman really gets murdered at the end of this movie. Like, starts Friday, $5, and it's just like, what are we doing? And I think that there was just a real outrage and exhaustion about. I think more than something like Friday the 13th or Halloween, because some people might think it was silly, like Siskel and Ebert were like really outraged about rather watered down kind of films. But this film, I think there is a case for finding offense to it and maybe making a connection. Like, a guy could see this who's on the edge and going, great, that sounds like my weekend. I want to do that because he could do that, And so I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, like, and it's too good. Like, we were just full circle on that. Spinell's too good. Savini's makeup is too good. So it's just too strong.
Right.
You don't see the wires and the Scotch tape, like most horror movies.
There's that. I guess Siskel was really hard reacting to this movie too, and I saw a news segment where he's talking about how they were showing like a loop of this movie like outside of theaters and stuff.
That's right. They did that at Times Square.
Yeah, and I guess it looked like it was done like a 16 too, maybe like a telecine type thing. It's not even like a VHS tape.
No, I think you're right. Yeah.
And he was just talking about, I think that's wrong. They shouldn't be doing that, just exposing the general public to like the goriest scenes of this movie. It's pretty nuts.
It's really nuts.
Well,
really
there's that. Well, they wanted to do something. I think there was good intention. I really think, especially if you have not seen the film and just on the surface, it could feel like the walls are falling down of civilization. Like, this is acceptable. This is not X-rated. What are we doing, society?
Right. I guess, like, I totally see your point, and I always kind of fall back on when I think about this stuff, because it is, I have the same fears too. Who wouldn't when you watch a movie like this, that it's going to like influence somebody or whatever. But I always fall back at the end of the day. I always think like, oh well, if movies and video games like cause people to kill people, then we'd all be dead, right?
Yeah,
because
true.
There's just so much of that shit. It's so pervasive in our society.
It's a debate. It's a debate. I think I'm for some reason taking this role, but I will just for the thought experiment. Sure. I think the smart people would be saying, not even impressionable kids, but an adult who, like I said earlier, was on the edge. Like John Hinckley is an example. Like, John Hinckley wasn't doing so hot, and then he saw Taxi Driver. You know what I mean? And but I still don't think there's a correlation with Taxi Driver enough where it's like we have to like have no one be able to see Taxi Driver. It's just keep it in mind kind of culture, civilization here. And I think that it's about people who are on the edge feeling excited and emboldened, and not like someone who's totally normal walking to Maniac, like Yeah, I'm feeling good. I just my kids first week in school. Oh, I got to murder people. I just saw this movie. It's just, I think it's more like people who are like really borderline. So I think there is some validity to it. Moving on.
All right, moving on.
Controversy.
Well, I mean, that's basically it. I mean, but the movie was a hit at Cannes, which I think is funny. And
no, it's Cannes.
Cannes. It was big Cannes on the Croisette. It was a big deal.
They were raving. They were standing up. They were like, ooh la la, Maniac.
And I think it's funny that Joe Spinell got Sylvester Stallone to march down the Croisette in a Maniac shirt, but I guess he did.
Really? Is there video of that?
I gotta find it. Yeah,
so good,
so amazing. All right, I gotta talk about my favorite scenes and my favorite just little underrated passage in the movie because it's a big deal and it speaks also to what also made this movie great, or really effective. So there were a lot of ideas. I won't bring up the clam, but there's a lot of ideas that Joe Spinell wanted to do, with this movie, and Lustig was always kind of having to rein him in, or he'd have to entertain him, to some extent to keep him happy, and they'd get into fights and whatever. But what would happen is literally when Bill Lustig would clock out, making this movie, I'm done today, everybody. Joe Spinell and his best friend Luke Walter would presumably, I'm guessing, do big fat rails, steal the camera equipment, and go out and shoot stuff in the middle of the night. Okay, and
is that in the film? Is any of it in the film?
The best stuff.
Oh fuck! Like what?
Okay, so the best stuff was imagine this scene not being in the movie if this didn't happen. The scenes of Joe Spinell. Sure.
Can I guess?
Yep.
Mannequin.
Yes.
Window?
The shots of Joe Spinell in the mannequin store windows, which are beautifully shot. Like some of the coolest looking stuff is shot by a guy who doesn't know how to operate the fucking camera. And it's Joe Spinell looking at all the mannequins and
great.
and it
very
adds,
lyrical.
And it totally
the music.
Adds, yep. Mm-hmm. The music adds kind of like a sympathetic quality. You're getting more into that mind, and it kind of, really builds the character.
It's getting pretty close to an art house film right then.
Exactly. It's total Queens plumbing art house. And the but Luke Walter is such an incredible character in all this too. I mean, that was his car, that the big headshot was shot in that we keep talking about. So Luke played a big part into kind of making this movie too. I mean, he's actually credited as the assistant to Mr. Spinell in the credits, but he's a character as well too. He's actually in Goodfellas for a second.
Oh,
he's in
what? Who?
He's the guy. It's very quick. Tom, you'll know it's a very quick scene where Joe Pesci takes out the truck driver out of the seat, out of the front seat, and slaps him around. Yeah, that's Luke.
He's like, you don't know who we are.
Yeah.
But we know who you are.
Right. Exactly.
Really? Okay.
That's Luke.
All right.
That's Luke. And fun little fact to tie Taxi Driver into all this too is Joe Spinell is in Taxi Driver, but Joe, just to show the connection between him and Luke, he brought Luke also for the audition, and Spinell tried to get Luke the role of the Secret Service agent. And the reason is he marched in and he told Scorsese, he goes, my friend Luke, he knows what it's like to be shot. He's been shot 12 times by an Uzi while he was working security during a bank robbery, which is true. This guy's been shot 12 times, so he didn't get the part.
Wow!
But he's in Goodfellas, but Luke is amazing.
I think they wanted more of a wasp, ultimately, with the security guard and taxi driver. Go ahead.
Totally. But so Luke's a fascinating character, and him and Joe intersected in a lot of different ways. I got to know Luke personally because I was working at Troma, everybody's favorite. You got to start somewhere. That was my first film job, but. There was a time when we, re-released this movie here, The Last Horror Film, which is the follow-up to Maniac, kind of a
filmed at Cannes
sequel, filmed at Cannes, and it's Carolyn Monroe and Joe Spinell back at it in another horror movie. It's not really that great at all, but
it's a curio, though.
It is a curio. It is, and so I basically reached out to Luke Walter through the advice of Lustig to kind of get some insight. And it was pretty amazing just, reaching out to him, doing the interview, learning more about Joe Spinell. And Luke actually wanted to do the interview at a strip club in Queens, which he drugged me out to on a Wednesday morning during a lasagna buffet.
Shut up.
Yeah, and the
Wednesday
reason
morning.
it was horrible, but the reason we went, I was like, why are we at a strip club at Wednesday morning? Right now, and it was because that was the place, Gallagher's in Queens. That was the place that Joe was the night before he died, and
wow, okay.
he partied hardy at Gallagher's. And unfortunately, he slipped in the shower, when he got back home, and he was a hemophiliac. This is super dark now, but that's how he died. He bled out in the shower, and so it was this really crazy thing. And so we kind of were back in that space, and he hadn't been back there since, and so it was really freaky. But it stuck with me, that experience of meeting Luke. He was such a character. He was pretty. I just got to give him a shout out because he was such a character.
Yeah, sure.
I remember the second I met him, he was like, my kid wouldn't get out of bed this morning, so I had to put a fucking hole in the wall. He's like one of those guys. And but he inspired me enough to kind of make my own little Maniac, and how we were talking about how Maniac is very much, Bill Lustig capturing the character that Joe Spinell is creating and the world Joe Spinell is creating. You're kind of this objective camera. I kind of did my own DIY student film starring Luke, who was channeling his best friend Joe in that same sort of way. So I think our
this is getting like Nathan Fielder here.
It is. It is. And so I don't want to eat up too much of the clock.
And then he was filming me.
Yeah, right. But I don't want to eat up too much of the clock because after we're past the show, I do want to show you guys a bit of this footage that I actually found on VHS, captured it, and re-imported. I'll show it after we're done here because I don't want to eat up too much of the clock. But just a kind of fun show.
Moment it up?
We could do it as a moment. Yeah, we'll do it as a moment. But it was just kind of a fun thing because they're so connected, these two guys.
I got you. I look forward to seeing that. Yeah. So, one thing I noticed that we haven't talked about much is William Lustig. I don't know now. I'm a little confused. Like, when and where do I credit him? In his filmmaking. But I find really effective the great classic suspenseful Hitchcockian kind of horror moment with the subway pursuit of the nurse.
Mm-hmm.
It's very well handled, and the way it resolves in maybe one of the worst places that a person could wind up in, which is the bathroom of a New York City 1980s subway. Holy shit, what a location. But just, how it's like, it becomes so dreamlike because it's completely just an unpopulated world. It becomes just her and this the stalker, the predator, and I don't know. I just find that really effective filmmaking, and I'm assuming that I should properly be crediting Lustig in this case for that set piece.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I heard it was sort of like a big, bunch of people working together, a family type movie. Like everyone pitching in ideas and going for it. That subway thing has a really cool. Has a really cool visual moment too, where they punch in like on the stairs.
Love that.
And then it goes. It punches in on her reaction. The sort of like hard post edit kind of punch in type thing.
Mm-hmm. Where it gets
great. Do it at
it's like you're saying the 16 is so punched in that it's the grain really starts becoming accentuated.
It gets grainier, yeah. And they do. That's the last shot of the movie. Does that same trick too?
Mm-hmm.
But I love when there's just a couple of cool camera tricks in a movie, and that they're subtle with their use of it. That's awesome.
Yeah, there's some nice rock and roll stylization once in a while.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like that set piece in the subway is a perfect example of him constructing, like a truly suspenseful moment in that. I mean, that'd be terrifying to have a guy like that, chasing you.
Exactly.
And it's also kind of smart too, because the way the New York City subway works, it's like sometimes there's only one staircase down, and to get out of the subway, you have to go out the same way that you went down. So you have to actually go back towards him to run out, which is really scary.
Yeah.
And
there's only one exit,
Yeah.
Back out the entrance. No, exactly. And just and so I guess, like we were saying, it's so DIY and rock and roll that I'm assuming it was done at 3 a.m. I'd love to know the stop actually, because that's the other thing about New York subways. It's it depends on what stop you're deserted on.
Well,
do you have an idea?
Well, yeah, because one thing that's awesome about this movie too, when you dig into the commentary and stuff, like with that subway scene, it's actually like 3 or 4 different subway stops, that are kind of cobbled together. And then there's so much of this movie, like the scene with the head explosion in the car, the whole way that scene plays out was shot in like 3 different locations on like weeks apart from each other, and like there's so much of that cobbling together little pieces and making it all kind of work seamlessly, in this run and gun style movie. And I think that like if this movie were the same movie but had so much more money, it would be way less interesting, because it's just that sort of run and gun DIY Queens plumbing auteur.
Could think of an example of that.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
It's punk rock time, and maybe let's just.
I wonder how they. Just real quick before we leave on the subway, I just wonder how they light that stuff. Like, there's some times in the movie you could feel that they had to push it, like on the beach.
I'm sure they're just blasting out the exposure.
Yeah, like the Son of Sam thing, they had to push it in the telecine or something. You can tell they had to lift the black, lift everything. But
for the beach,
like, how do they even get any exposure in the subway?
They had a process. They had a process to the way that they were processing the movie, or something with the stock, where they were able to do a lot of low light stuff with the film, and they knew they had to do that. I mean, they're like, at least they really knew what they were doing in terms of the post, and I think Lustig, from his background, knew a lot about the post
that's a good point.
Everything.
Like how to prep. In anticipation of the limitations.
And stereo, he knew.
Because he did porn, right?
He did, and like stereo was a new concept, like right around that time in terms of mixing, and so he really, this movie pushes that to a whole nother level, and he was pushing what he could do, with the limited means that he had. So that is a huge part of how he should be credited to this, is that his technical.
Well, and just the MVP. We got a minute or so, but I just wanted to. I'll just say it, and then you guys just go off. I'll shut up. Just Tom Savini.
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, yeah. I mean, Tom Savini, obviously one of the best, in the business for what he does, coming off of Dawn of the Dead and going into this movie. And it's like, he, with this had so much shit laying around the house by this point. And it's interesting that in that scene when all the mannequins are pulling him apart and you see like the decapitated head woman coming up, from the bed, that is the mother from Friday the 13th.
I knew it. I recognized that decapitated because if I'm understanding this right, he spent his days in New Jersey in the woods and shooting Friday, and then the nights he was shooting Maniac. That's from what I'm understanding. I was just going to say that it's like that's his year is 79, I think. Like he's at I guess I'm just saying at Maniac, you're seeing his full powers come to bore. Side note also, he didn't do the Nightmare effects, right?
He didn't. Marcus, take it home. You want to say something?
I don't know anything about the Nightmare effects.
No, I thought you had something else you want to say.
I was just going to say that Savini, the reason he's in it is because he had his head. His head was like, he already had that head sculpted, and that's why he got the cameo.
Might as well be in the car.
And the music is awesome. All right,
Jay Chataway.
Jay Chataway. All right, that's it.
Great movie. Not for everybody.
No.
And especially maybe not these days. I don't know.
Apologies to anyone who watched the Netflix Jonah Hill, Emma Stone movie Maniac, or
if they were confused, or Godspeed to anyone who saw it for any reason whatsoever. Yeah. Or side note, I love you, Elijah Wood, but that reboot, that's honest. Yeah. Just let's let sleeping dogs lie sometimes. Yeah, we did it, folks. I was thinking we should maybe, I don't know if we're not lightening things up, but I was just wanted to mention we're going to have next week's show, of course, and I'm inclined to lighten things up.
How about the week
after? I know, it's a summer of bummer. The week after next, we're going to lighten things up. Like, let's do that a lot. Let's have like an ice cream movie, for Christ's sake,
Sure.
Mystic Pizza.
Boom. There you go. Mermaids. So
I could do it an hour.
Rami would do that. Splash.
Betsy's honor. Splash. All right. Well,
Splash. Yeah.
We'll figure it out. But because next week, for some reason, we're riding the bummer train all the way to the final stop, man.
Yeah, we are.
And next week is
Next week's episode will be 1 fucking hour. We're doing a double dip here on another a director we've covered previously on the show. I'm anxious to get back to his work because he's 1 fucking hour ready, and that is Nicholas Roeg, and we are going to be doing his film Oy vey, same year as Maniac, Bad Timing from 1980, starring Art Garfunkel.
Bad vibe.
Yeah. Exactly.
And Taxi Drivers, Harvey Keitel.
From now on, like you have to be a movie considered on this show, you have to have an actor or a director that's previously appeared in another episode.
It's the 1 degrees of 1 fucking hour, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah, you have to have at this point some kind of connection, or more to the point, like this. There is kind of a lattice work or a tree like diagram of our films and how they can. I mean, I'm sure there's many connections that we're spacing on, you know. Mm-hmm. But like Peter Falk, right? Somewhere in there, maybe.
Is he? Oh yeah.
Well, I just mean like in some film we're not even thinking about, but he probably,
right.
Yeah, just for an example.
Yeah.
But that's just the kind of guys we are. That's kind of what we're picking, I guess.
All right.
But we got through it. We did Maniac. I guess we should close it out the traditional way.
Yeah, we're gonna do that. If I can set up this moment of Zen a little bit, if you guys don't mind. So, as I mentioned, on the show, this is the world premiere screening of this movie that I made with Joe Spinell's best friend, Luke Walter. I just want to give a little preface to this, if I may, boys. Please entertain me. Indulge me for a minute. So basically, this was filmed, I think, in 2007, maybe. I think so. It's 15 years ago, and I basically just fell in love with this guy. When I met him, I thought he was just like the coolest dude ever. I loved hearing stories about Joe and making Maniac and all this stuff, and I just like called him up and I was like, "Hey, this weekend, my friends and I, we're gonna make a movie. You want to be in a movie?" And I told him I just had this image in my head of him standing on top of a pickup truck with a sledgehammer, and I just wanted that sledgehammer to come down and smash through a windshield. That's the image that I had. And he just was like, of course we'll do that. Come on, let's do it. So he was like, what? I think he was in his early 70s, so he was just down, to do this. And so in the tradition of Maniac, okay, he shows up to my house and he rolls up. And by coincidence, in my living room, my roommate had a mannequin, okay, in the living room. And he immediately zeroed in on that. And I think that's what opened the Maniac door. And immediately he clutched the mannequin and fell to the ground and started crying, basically, screaming, "Why did I do this to you? Why did I do this to you?" And so I'm rolling this, and I'm filming this on VHS because, it was that time we're all experimenting with shooting things on VHS. And I'm filming this, and we do a scene or two, and then he calls cut, and he goes over to me and he says, "I think I found my character's motivation." And I was like, "Okay, what's that?" And he's like, "You see this mannequin over here?"
Motivation.
Yeah, you see this mannequin over here? This mannequin represents a woman I used to love, and so I killed her, and I cut up her body into small pieces. And I'm sitting here on this couch over here because we were filming on my couch. And he's like, I'm sitting here on this couch imagining a wasteland in my mind. And I'm in the wasteland with the sledgehammer, smashing through shit to try and figure out where I hit the parts of her body. And so I was like, all right. And I was like, all right,
lovely.
we're making lovely. We're making that movie, and so that's what I sort of committed to. And I'm just following him and letting him call the shots. And it didn't turn out to anything that I was really happy with. But for the spirit of tonight's moment, I just cut something together very quickly just to show you this footage of a 73-year-old man and his sledgehammer and actually climbing on top of a car that we found in a junkyard and smashing the windshield. So it's pretty amazing. Okay. So this is warning, very student.
Can't wait. Sounds good.
Very student filmy, so warning. But here we go. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Moment.
me.
Nice. What did
There
he
you go.
think of it?
He was so into
awesome.
it.
That was awesome.
He was so
Bravo.
into it. He was just like into
He loved it, right?
all experimentation, and it must have been a similar experience to what Maniac was like, and for Joe, like just like so into it, and the like we were talking about the like Queen's Plumbing sort of thing, and that was on full effect here in terms of just like, okay, he's coming up with a zillion ideas, and I'm just following it, trying to do it, but it was so cool just to see like him.
Well, you were his Lustig,
I was, yeah,
right?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. So, but that's all we did. Just
Seems that way.
We basically
In this Nathan Fielder rehearsal version of, for some reason, you guys are doing a Maniac. I love it. Sold.
right, exactly. So there you go. There it is. World premiere. All right, and maybe we'll give you a little bonus moment of Zen, and we will see you next week, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. That was 1 fucking hour on Maniac. We'll see you next week for another bummer. It's the summer of bummer here at 1 fucking hour, and so long, everybody.
Yeah.
Let's wave.
All right, guys. Be nice to each other. Bye.
Okay. Bye, Marcus. You got to wave. Okay, thanks. Okay, bye.
I have a lot to say. First of all, being in
these are my spokesmen.
First of all, being in the first Godfather, I have this to say. The Godfather was nominated for the Best Picture and won, but the director, Bob Fosse of Cabaret, won. That's bullshit. You cannot have the Best Picture unless the director is also nominated. Who made the picture? Somebody's mother?
The director.
This man made yours. Are you kidding? Who's kidding who around here?
This is a dark day in Hollywood.
Absolutely.
The sun is shining, but this is a very
This is a dark day for our pal.
The greatest picture of all time was made, and they haven't recognized the
director. Who made it? The shark?
Motherfucking goddamn orange peel beef.